Garrett. You know we love animals here on this podcast.
I mean, that's a good assumption to make.
Yeah,
Unless it's an insect. Those are pests.
I don't think that's an animal.
Good.
I think that's an insect.
we're drawing the animal line right there.
Yeah. So I learned today, just arbitrarily through someone at work, that in Godfather, the cat that is used in the movies was actually a stray that was just found on set, and its entire inclusion in the movie was improvised.
I didn't know that. If that's true, that's actually kind of nice. I mean, not saying I don't doubt you, but it's the figure of speech, if that's true. But that's really cool, though. I wonder whose decision it was to throw it in frame.
Yeah, I don't know, but its entire pretty present position in the movie is completely just kind of ad-libbed, and they were like, "There's a cat in the story now."
Yep, I just imagine Marlon Brando's like, "This is now a part of my character, and it's gonna be here." That's what I didn't know that, and usually I know a lot about movies, so thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Well, everyone, welcome back to the Drive Back Podcast. My name is Garrett.
And I'm Adrian.
And on today's show, we've got a show and tell, which is probably our favorite episode type to do. And what is that, Adrian?
Show and tell is where I have seen a movie, and I make Garrett watch it because he hasn't, and he has seen a movie, and he makes me watch it because I haven't.
That's absolutely correct. So, as is tradition, we have two very different movies today. And we're going to go ahead and start off with the one that Adrian had put forward, and that is White Chicks. Released in 2004, it was directed by Keenan Ivory Wayans and stars Marlon Wayans, Sean Wayans, and Busy Phillips. Two disgraced FBI agents go way undercover in an effort to protect hotel heiresses, the Wilson sisters, from a kidnapping plot. So, Adrian...
Sounds bulletproof, right?
Yeah. As much as any material can be, I guess. So what made you pick this one?
Mainly, I found out you hadn't seen it. I think we were chatting arbitrarily after one of the recordings, and I just realized you hadn't. And I don't necessarily think this movie is good or bad. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I just couldn't believe you hadn't seen it, so I just had to make you watch it.
Gotcha. Well, that is the entire point of these episodes. So, so I guess we should do some spoiler-free thoughts, which I will lead with because I hadn't seen this before. And I guess after watching it, there's a reason I haven't seen this before, and I never want to see it again. This was a trash heap. I don't know how people find this funny. I don't like it. It just screams back to an era that I try to forget, which is like the early 2000s kind of comedy. And it really takes the notion, you could have made it so much funnier about two black guys making fun of how every single white woman is, and they waste it. I feel like it could be funnier today. I mean, I don't know about people taking on someone else's race. I don't know how that'll go over today. It just was not funny, and unfortunately, the place that you stream this from, which I believe was HBO Max, has the uncut, director's unrated edition, and I was like,
the Snyder cut,
the Wayans cut, which has
30 minutes of uncut Joker footage in it for some reason of Jared Leto's Joker.
Oh, you know about Robin, don't you? I hated this movie. But what do you think before we jump into spoilers?
I definitely, upon rewatch, it is not as funny as I remember it being when it came out. I remember being shown this at a friend's house, and maybe it is one of those things with a lot of people at the time of the era that it was very funny. But I think what has done this movie over, if we are talking, like you said, it could be done better today, is Bo Burnham's stand-up when he does the white woman's Instagram. I think that is making fun of the stereotype in today's humor, and this one just feels, like you said, it does feel dated watching it. Mm-hmm. I found myself just kind of cringing at most of the stuff I remember thinking was really funny. And a lot of this movie is just not socially okay anymore.
Yeah.
Then it was oh, maybe we're pushing it a bit. Now it's it's pretty ballsy. there's some stuff that happens that's pretty risque in this movie compared to what I remember it being.
Yeah. I would agree with those sentences. Or sentiments. I don't even know what I was trying to say there. This movie broke my brain on Tuesday when I watched it. So, but let's go ahead and dump a spoiler warning. If you have not seen White Chicks, I heartily agree that you should not see it. I don't know what Adrian says. It is on HBO Max if you do want to torture yourself for an hour and 50 minutes or whatever it was.
I think that's right, yeah.
And let's go ahead and jump into some spoilers. And actually, I do want to mention this because I saw on IMDb that it had a bunch of Razzie Award nominations. One was for the Wayans sisters. For best female performer or worst female performance, excuse me, and
That's
it's
really
them.
Fun. That's great.
But also on-screen couple for the Wayans sisters, and it's like, oh man, I even like I'm trying to put aside like today's cultural zeitgeist and like what we consider funny these days, and I'm trying to imagine back then, and I still don't know how this movie got made.
Sure, I think let's establish that the humor does not hold up to today, but some of the things that I did find really kind of entertaining was watching Terry Crews bid an exorbitant amount of money to pick one of them up. Like, he's like basically drooling, and he's like, I'll do whatever it takes. Like, he just wants it so bad. And I just found it really funny to see Terry Crews, because now obviously I know him. Everyone probably knows him from the Old Spice commercials and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which he's very, very good in.
Yeah.
And this is just a different Terry Crews than I think a lot of people would be expecting to see. And there's he does do a lot of really funny things when he's not when the movie isn't poking fun at race or stereotypes, like just Terry Crews being the character, I found to be pretty enjoyable.
Yeah.
I thought he did a good job.
A well-deserved earner of some points in my book. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to not like Terry Crews.
Carried White Chicks. Yeah.
I mean, he could have. I mean, those guns. I don't know. Not at the
other
end,
scene that I want to talk about that really made me kind of just start to roll my eyes. I mean, not start, but like continue to roll them. Was it the scene where both of the brothers are sitting in their apartment and the girls come to the door, and they're supposed to host the sleepover, and it's like, if you gave me 30 seconds, I could not erase my male presence from this house. Like, 3 people coming in, there would be me dressed as a white chick, and then a photo of me now on the wall, and they'd be like, who's that? And I'd have to, it just doesn't make any sense. It was just so rough.
I do want to point out one scene that actually did make me laugh, which was in the beginning of the movie. And the stereotypical Russian mobster delivering the ice cream is actually a real ice cream delivery guy. Not a criminal.
It's the same as the cat on Godfather. He was just around, and they asked if he could do it.
True. Yeah. Well, it's like he's actually a decent guy. He's not like the villain, which is just great. I don't know. That made me laugh. And then it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, I think where the movie loses out is the gimmick works on paper, sure. Let's do the stereotype. Let's look past that. That works in the pitch room. What I think doesn't work is the whole kidnapping crime plot. I think this movie would have been much better had they just made the joke the joke instead of adding this over elaborate plot and doing like an undercover thing. I think it would have been really funny just to have them. Almost like a Freaky Friday, I think, would have been more interesting. I was just
going to say Freaky Friday or like the horror movie Freaky, like that sort of situation.
Yeah, like something like that would have been way more interesting to watch than I feel like the knowledge of that they know what's happening makes it a little creepy. Yeah. And it just has this air of like cringe to the whole thing.
And speaking of creepy, when are we going to talk about how they look? Like, it is...
Terry Crews liked it.
Well, I can't speak for Terry Crews.
He's like, your jawline is so strong.
I can speak for me, and that was horrifying. I mean, we've watched quite a few horror movies. I've watched quite a few horror movies in my time, and I couldn't sleep that night. They were my sleep paralysis demons at the foot of my bed. It was a bad night after that. It's nightmare fuel how they look, and it's
funny.
them in makeup, which is even worse. Like, it could have been funny if it was the actual actresses, and then they were just acting like Marlon and Sean,
Yeah.
and just like that could have been funny. But like, it's just horrible looking makeup, and it is haunting.
Yeah, again, I think it would have been funny had the joke been that it's bad, which I think they were kind of trying to do, but it just doesn't. Like, I think again, the whole plot, like it seems to take itself a little more seriously than I think they intended it to come across, and like as the longevity of this movie's gotten longer and longer, or the lifespan of it. So I just don't. Yeah, it definitely doesn't hold up, but it does have some moments trickled throughout. I would say it's not enough to run out and watch it. But if you've seen it and you feel like you remember it being really funny, there is still a couple people home to greet you, but everyone's pretty much cleared out of this movie in today's age. There's funnier stuff referencing the same joke that's available.
It's
to
definitely
listen to or watch.
It's definitely one of those circumstances where like your memory of it is probably funnier than the actual movie itself.
Yeah.
Like, I rewatched Dodgeball recently, and that movie is not as funny as everyone thought it was when I was in 5th grade. You know, like,
It's that same. I would say that's the same kind of humor, though. Like, it's the same air where people are like, "This is hilarious," and it's just today. I think humor's become a lot more subtle and a lot more observational. Whereas it's less like, "I'm going to tell you this joke now, and then this person's going to tell a joke, and let's go back and forth." Like, I feel like it's just much more nuanced today and much funnier. But again, I'll probably in 10 years, I'll be like, man, 2022, so observational. I love when people just tell jokes straight up. I'm sure it'll change as everything does. But right now, that's how this movie is on rewatch.
just be like the unbearable Gen Zers where it's like, I'm just going to throw a bass boost on the picture of a cockroach, and it's going to get millions of views.
Dude, I love those, though. The one with SpongeBob oversaturated, and it says, me getting beans with the boys. And it just is like an overshadowed. It's so good.
Sure, if you say so. I got nothing else to say about this movie, man. I hated it. I hated every moment of it, except for like the first 5 minutes. And it was unbearable. So
yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely not worth the watch. But if you have seen it, and you do want to give it a watch, there's not much there for you. That's kind of my...
Enjoy your memories of it. Don't actually... Or like maybe look up a clip on YouTube or something. But certainly don't sit through the entire thing again. But let's go ahead. We'll jump into some final thoughts. Maybe a score here. I'll go first since it was my first time. I said that it's an egregious waste of time, money, and talent that is beyond unfunny. It hurts, and I don't ever want to see it again. I gave it a 3.
Not the lowest, but pretty down there, right? Or is it the lowest?
Pretty down there. It is about the same rating I gave Cinderella last year on Amazon.
Yeah. I think this movie, this might be my lowest. I gave it a 10. I did not find this movie to hold up at all, really. I got a couple chuckles, but I would have laughed more watching a comedian on YouTube or any other video, so it didn't really hold up that well. But it is a movie that exists. And Terry Crews is worth 10 points to me. He's pretty funny in enough just being himself, so a 10.
I am curious. I'm actually looking through our scores at the moment, and that is not your lowest score ever. It's your lowest score in a while, but certainly not your lowest score ever. Your lowest score ever is still Deck the Halls at a 4.
Oh, yeah.
Which, that speaks to that movie. But let's go ahead... Let's jump into our favorite new thing we do, which is looking at the critic and audience scores for the movies that we were talking about. The first up is White Chicks, and we are going to start with the Metacritic score.
Metacritic, I'm going to guess it's sitting at a 21.
Ooh, not quite. White Chicks on Metacritic is at a 41.
Hey, you trust Metacritic. There you go.
I usually do. But also, a lot of these reviews came out when the movie came out.
Again, times have changed for sure.
Times have changed for sure, which definitely kind of plays into that. But, for once, let's see if Rotten Tomatoes can get it right. What do you think the critic score is on Rotten Tomatoes?
critic score, again, most probably came out when it came out. I'm going to say 32.
Ooh, not quite. White Chicks has a 15% on Rotten
So
Tomatoes.
Rotten Tomatoes got it right.
Well, remember, that they're just saying that 15% of people gave it a review over a 6, which, if you look at the scores on Metacritic, kind of falls into the same math point.
Yeah.
So, if the average score is a 41, that means that the 15% is probably more justified. But the critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes says it's a scattershot comedy that's silly and obvious. Okay. I don't think it's either of those things. But let's go ahead and what's in the audience score for White Chicks?
I think this is definitely going to be higher because it was kind of a classic when it came out. So I'm going to guess 68.
It's the closest you've been all day, but still off. It is a 55.
Wow.
So,
just goes to show you can never predict White Chicks.
Well, that's the thing. You usually can. But let's go ahead and move on to the second movie of the day, which is the movie that I had selected that Adrian had never seen before, and that is Mandy. The second film today, obviously, Mandy, released in 2018. It was directed by Panos Cosmatos and stars Nicolas Cage, Andrea Riseborough, and Linus Roach. The enchanted lives of a couple in a secluded forest are brutally shattered by a nightmarish hippie cult and their demon biker henchmen, propelling a man into a spiraling, surreal rampage of vengeance. That sums it up pretty well. So, as far as why I selected this movie to watch, I had always heard a lot about this movie, and then I watched it on Shudder probably last year. I want to say maybe not even a year ago, I'm not going to give away my thoughts, but I knew it was something that I wanted to show Adrian at some point, just to see what he thought about it, because it is one of those movies that I think the kind of difference between the critic and the audience reception will probably mirror what ours is going to be, what our reactions are. Okay. But, Adrian, this was your first time watching it. What's the spoiler-free thoughts you have for Mandy?
Yeah, without revealing too much, I thought this movie was really cool. I think the plot doesn't really matter, and that's okay for this movie. I think the plot is used as a device that this is definitely more of like an art housey art piece of a film. And the plot, to me, was used to put characters in scenarios to showcase some type of, like, almost as if you were walking through a museum. Like, the plot felt like I was being carried from, like, here's this thing I want to show you, and then the plot is like, okay, go ahead. And I know that sounds like every movie, but in this case, I'm trying to outline without spoiling anything that it's very clearly, like, designed to take you to one specific location, show you that thing, because it's very cool and very artistic, and then move to the next one where there's like a very artistic scene. Not a spoiler, but like there's a scene where Nicolas Cage is just screaming in a bathroom, and that feels like an art piece almost when you're watching it. And it's like, that's what I mean by the plot doesn't matter, but that's okay because what you're watching is very cool.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum it up is this movie is an experience. It is not, You're not going for a story. You are going to see some stuff that will probably stick with you for at least the night, maybe 2 days after watching it. And that is the best way to sum it up. It is an experience. I'm struggling to save spoiler stuff for after, but
yeah, it kind of reminds me if you've ever been to any art installation, like if you've ever been to Meow Wolf, or like I haven't, but the Stranger Things experience or the Van Gogh experience. It's something that, like, I can describe to you what's in those art installations, but unless you go to them, you're not really understanding what's happening in there. Like, I could tell you that there's a giant projector and the whole room is filled with Starry Night, and you can picture that, but unless you actually see it and you're in the room, you're not going to feel that in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this movie is. Like, we're going to spoil things and talk about what happens to an extent, and it's still not going to spoil the experience. Like, you're not going to understand what it's like to watch it on screen. And it's pretty rare that a movie can kind of actually achieve that. So it was really fun.
Highly recommend if you're going to watch the movie, which I think we're both saying you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do it with the lights off.
Very violent, though.
Do it with the lights off, for sure.
But if you're not into just like unnecessary violence, I'd probably steer clear.
Yeah, this is kind of like the horror meets Grindhouse meets indie meets John Wick type movie
Yeah.
that no one was asking for, but we're all glad we got. But let's go ahead and drop a spoiler warning for Mandy. If you have not seen it before, you can stream it on Shudder if you're subscribed to that subscription network, or you can rent it pretty much anywhere that you can rent movies from, or if you're like me, buy the Steelbook because it looks really good. So let's go ahead and jump into some spoilers for this movie. And I actually want to share an interesting piece of trivia that I found out today. Is that the movie starts off with a song by the band King Crimson, which is an older, very popular band in the metal world, and like classic metal kind of style, not like modern metal. Which this song is named Starless, but it comes from an album called Red. Which is the name of Nicolas Cage's character. So just an interesting fact that there's a connection there. Cool. But let's go ahead and talk Nicolas Cage, because I think this is one of the best performances he's ever given.
And I think it was because it made no sense.
Yeah.
I think he really just gets to be Nicolas Cage unhinged in this.
His tirade in the bathroom is among some of the best acting moments I've seen. Because it's all in one take, and he goes from despair to anger to screaming to like just this acceptance of what has to happen.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on it really quick, that why I said that's like an art piece is because the way that a lot of the shots in this movie are done are very artistic, but that shot in particular, you are outside the room looking into the room, like almost if you've seen Hereditary and you see like those model shots where you're outside the house but you can see everything going on in the room. It's kind of like that. It's like definitely you are the fourth wall. Yeah. And it feels like you're watching someone in a glass box. It looks like someone pulled a wall out and you get to see someone live their life. And it's really cool. I think Nicolas Cage does an amazing job. The range that he portrays in that one shot is pretty deep and really cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic to watch. And, I mean, Andrea Riseborough, who we have seen, the most recent movie we've seen with her was Possessor. Yes. Which we covered with Miniac. She was the main character in that movie. Has a tendency to take on these kind of weird experimental indie roles, and I'm really liking it from her. Yeah. And then Linus Roach, playing the cult leader, plays that ego off really well.
That one part when he's laying in the bed and he goes like, "Please." I was like, I don't know. I feel like even the director was like, is that supposed to go on that long? Like, is that correct, or what's going on?
So, interesting fact that I found out about Mr. Linus Roach is that he actually is a real-life cult leader.
Really?
Yeah, he's a part of some, like, new wave religious group that really focuses on, like, meditation and, like, spirituality. It's nothing, like,
doomsday,
outright doomsday or harmful. I mean, there's always a brainwashing element, but... which is really interesting that they hired someone who does that to come in here, and it feels perfect for it. But there is something I really wanted to a couple connections that I had found after watching some YouTube videos after the fact, which is that number one, when Red comes back into the house after losing Mandy, he's wearing the t-shirt with the tiger on it.
Yes.
Which... Then, later in the film, when he sees the chemist, the tiger is let out of its cell, metaphorically linking to him being let off of his leash to go out and achieve full retribution. Cool. But also, I don't remember if it's during the cast part or in the movie, but there's the artwork that Mandy does, or that Mandy has.
Very talented.
And one of them is of Red, and behind him is a tiger. And it's like him almost transforming into the tiger. Which also, there's another animated point where it's the woman who's kind of kneeling down next to this beast of a monster or whatever, and she takes the stone out and essentially heals the monster. And a lot of people that I've seen online theorize that, there's a big spoiler at the end of the movie. This doesn't take place on Earth. I'm pretty sure.
Which you can kind of, once you know that, the whole movie tells you the whole time that it doesn't, but it's a cool reveal when it happens.
But like it's basically that she's with him the entire time. And like once she dies, she's kind of like become this cosmic force that helps him get the rampage or the vengeance he's looking for, which I actually really like that idea. But speaking of rampage, speaking of vengeance, we got to talk about the practical effects in this movie because they're really good.
Yeah, the head crushing, all of it is just really satisfying in a weird way.
The one that still gets me is the cultist he puts the blade through the mouth of, and it doesn't look fake at all. Yeah.
It looks like they killed someone on set.
I don't wince during like violent parts of movies because I know that it's fake, but like there's that one part and I was just like, oh,
yeah, that's a tough one.
Also the giant wasp that stings her in the neck or whatever. Ugh.
Yeah, I thought that whole drug trip was pretty crazy. I wanted to talk specifically about what I thought, which was a very interesting, pretty much like a B plot of the movie, but is the difference in view of what love is for someone. And the cult leader saying that it's obedience, I thought was super interesting. I thought the whole Russian roulette sequence was very powerful for how much of a hold he had over the cult. Like, cult leaders are always very like prophetic and just like seem to be holier than thou, and people seem to just love them. And I felt like that scene really summed up that these followers were willing to literally do anything that he says just because he says it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting that later on Red decides not to kill. I think her name was Lucy or Linda.
The
young girl.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. But he chooses to let her live because I think, like, kind of reflecting on what happened in that Russian roulette scene, he's like, you've seen enough. Like, you can just go. Which I thought was a really powerful thing because that scene was crazy.
Either that, or if he was truly being guided by the cosmic force that was Mandy, Mandy would have known, too, from being inside there that she wasn't, like, a threat. She didn't do anything.
She wasn't down with all the stuff, yeah.
Which you could read into that after the fact, but yeah. I think on first viewing, you could definitely see it as, obviously the Russian roulette sequence. And then all the drug stuff, man, I don't do drugs at all. I have no inclination of doing it, but for some reason, this movie makes it look cool. Like, the super LSD or whatever is just basically like kerosene gel.
Yeah, I've never done any hard drugs, obviously, but I know that from other people that it's like the fuzzy feelings and like specifically the one that I really thought was interesting was the just like distorted fuzzy movements, which you can kind of get there if you've had a lot to drink, but it's just like it's more like a floaty feeling. I thought that was pretty good of a visual portrayal of what was happening, like that feeling of like, why am I like my hands already there? Like I was still moving and now I'm there. Like just kind of that whole realization portion was pretty good. But the sitting in the conversation in like that drug den or whatever when he's talking to her, nightmare fuel. If you were actually on some kind of drugs, I'd imagine that'd be absolutely stressful.
Yeah. In the part where he and her's faces are melding together back and forth is insane. Oh,
that reminded me of another really cool camera shot when he first sees Mandy, the cult leader, and instead of just showing you that it's playing over and over again or him saying it, the film actually plays her like that shot over and over again, and then actually freeze frames on Mandy's face like it is just a moment that is ingrained in his brain. And I thought that was such a cool way to storytell visually. I thought that was an awesome shot. And then later when he's like, you called to me even though you didn't mean to, or unintentionally or whatever, I thought that was really cool.
And I think it's so indicative, like speaking of the cultist, the leader, it's so, Jeremiah is his name, I believe, yeah.
Yes.
It's so indicative of actual cult leaders that all this talk, all this pomp and circumstance, and then when you're actually confronted by something completely just, like, starts off with, like, you can't touch me because God won't allow it, and then it's like, oh, well, what if I give you this, or what if I give you that? And then he's literally about to have his head crushed, and he's like, I'll suck your dick.
I'll do anything. Even the old lady tried to do it, too.
Yeah.
That was, like, their defense mechanism. It's like, what do you want from me?
Defense mechanism is just Ethel standing out in the hallway. Yeah. But
yeah, to me, I actually found I thought it was really cool. I'm a huge fan of just cult stuff. Like whenever there's kind of a new big one, I love researching all of it. I don't buy into really any of the stuff, but I'm fascinated behind the like ideology of it. I just think that is how people follow, how just larger than life the leaders are, how they're able to persuade people. Like I find all that stuff super interesting. So I found this super interesting, like just the cult aspect of it. Just I find the shots of just them even just existing really, really neat to watch, and I feel like it's a really cool portrayal of a smaller cult that it isn't largely known, but is just as dedicated as any other. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. I mean, we haven't even talked about like the demon bikers, which are pretty interesting.
The one with nails all over the body, and then the one with like the mask on. That was pretty cool.
You tore my shirt.
Also, I will say the one with the mask on when he's handcuffed and nailed next to the elevator shaft or whatever. One, terrible place to store a prisoner. Because literally what the only outcome if that person gets out happened, which is that they break out and then push you down the elevator shaft. So it's,
I mean, yeah.
It's like just such a ridiculous to me like spot. I mean, it made for a cool shot and a cool like coming out like I'm back kind of thing. Like I killed another one, but it was watching it. I was like, why would you? That's like me saying, hey, go stand near that cliff, and then I'm gonna come up to you, and we're gonna talk, and you're not gonna push me off, okay? Promise. And then, like it just seems so unthought through, but it was a pretty cool scene.
Oh man, I mean, the movie's chock full of cool stuff. Cool cinema. If you're a cinematography nut, you should definitely check this movie out. For sure.
One of the biggest spoilers, one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in any type of John Wick revenge action movie. It's just a straight up chainsaw fight. Two guys with chainsaws.
Let's go.
Just going for it. It's really cool.
The reveal of the giant chainsaw is great too. It's so much fun. Also, the shot of the total grindhouse, like low budget shot of the, I forget what it's called. I think it's called the Beast, which is the silver.
Beast, his weapon. Yeah,
yeah. When it's just flying through the air towards the mullet guy, is so good. I love it because the movie feels like it's a really high budget film, and then you get shots like that remind you that like, okay. Yeah, this is still an indie movie, and I love it.
Yeah, and it works. They timed those shots perfectly. Like, it feels so fun when they happen.
Which I found was interesting is that the director, his father, is the one who directed Tombstone.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to double check on that real quick, because I believe, from what I had read, the director of this one, Panos Cosmatos, was George P. Cosmatos was the director of Tombstone, so his father. But Panos was actually an assistant director on the film and used his residual payments to help fund his first movie.
How cool!
That's maybe why he has a good eye for filmmaking. You never know. Runs in the family, I guess. But that being said, let's go ahead. Let's drop some final thoughts and some scores for Mandy. Mr. Adrian, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I think this movie is super fun. I think it's definitely an experience, like an art installation almost. And I love that it exists, and I love that someone had the idea, and I love that they got people to do it. And I gave this movie a 93. I really, really enjoyed it.
Wow, alrighty. Yes, I mean, the best kind of comparison I can make is if, like, John Wick is, like, your big famous rock band, like your Journey, like your Bon Jovi, that kind of band. This is like the Tool, where it's like the progressive, like super experimental cousin, which I love. I said Mandy is a beautiful, haunting, and violent revenge thriller within an acid trip that is as fantastic to watch as it is to analyze, and I gave Mandy a 91. When I initially reviewed it, and that still holds true.
Oh, look at us. Pretty close.
There are definitely some things that I think drag on a little too long, but hey, it's all in the director's vision, and it doesn't really make the movie lesser because of it.
Yeah.
So, let's go ahead and get to our favorite part, the scores from critics and audiences. Adrian, what do you think the Metacritic score is for Mandy?
I think Metacritic is going to be a little more balanced, and I'm going to say 72.
You're closer, but you're still off. It is an 81 for Mandy.
Okay.
And it also does have the gold seal badge that says that it's a Metacritic must-see. So that's
cool. Yeah, I agree with that. That's fun.
Which is nice to throw on there. Adrian, what do you think the critic score is on Rotten Tomatoes for Mandy?
I'm going to stick with what I said, kind of, and I'm going to go 75.
Ooh, not quite. The Rotten Tomatoes critic score is 90%.
Oh, that's good to hear. Wow, that's good. Okay.
The critics' consensus says that Mandy's gonzo violence is fueled by a gripping performance by Nicolas Cage and anchored with palpable emotion conveyed between his volcanic outbursts. Which, I
like it.
So let's go ahead and go. What do you think the audience score is for Mandy?
Based off what you said at the beginning, I feel like you might have given it away a bit, just based off the spread that you thought would happen here. So I am going to go with 38.
Wow, not that low. It is a 67.
Oh, I thought the separation seemed way larger.
No, I mean, again, audiences don't know what they're looking for. They'd rather get, garbage than something good. I literally every single time that someone's like, I want original movies that like are challenging and tell new stories, and then you give them something like this, and they're like, yeah, it was terrible. And it's like, well, then what are you looking for? Do you want Iron Man but with blue and gold? Like what do you?
Correct.
It's so stupid. Anyhow, that is going to bring us to an end for this episode. But before we jump into next week, might be fun to actually reach out to all of you. If you have any questions that you would like to throw at us, anything you want to know about us or the drive back, next week is going to be a great time to ask those questions. And we'll be able to answer those for you next week. So if there is anything you want to know, let us know on Instagram, let us know on YouTube in the comments, and we can talk about it next week. Speaking of, Adrian, if anyone wants to follow us, where can they do that?
You can find us at the Drive Back Podcast, anywhere your heart desires, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Overcast, whatever you got. And we post every Monday, and on YouTube you'll get a bunch of extra content over there, like Garrett's movie collection. We do tier lists and things like that, and that is in addition to the podcast, but only on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe and follow there. We're here if you're looking at us now.
That is absolutely correct. Great job pointing all that out. You do it better than I ever could. Next week, we have our Halloween special. So, for our Halloween special, we have turned to our good friend Nadia from the YouTube channel Horror and More, who has recommended that we watch a movie called Malasanya 32, which appears to be a horror movie from, I can't tell if it is Spain or Mexico, but it is definitely a Spanish language speaking country, so we'll be checking that out. If you want to watch it along with us, it is on Shudder or AMC Plus if you have that Prime subscription. Otherwise, it is available to rent pretty much everywhere. So that's going to be next week. So Halloween special, and we got something special of our own beyond it being a special that we get to share next week. So
make sure to stick around for some special announcements.
And make sure that you send your questions. Like we said, it would be really fun to answer those. But that is going to bring us to an end of this episode. Mr. Adrian, have a great rest of the day. Hope all of you do too. I don't know why I went that direction. That's not.
You were going to ask me to plug.
I was going to ask you, hey, Adrian, where should you follow us if you don't already? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We love you so much. We will see you next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.